Hi.
Good morning.
Greg.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Obi.
Good morning. Yes, to the circle of people gathered outside of our space here in virtual space across.
In virtual space, yeah.
Yeah.
Those who've been following us, I think you're going to see a radical shift. I always kind of like this kind of year. I'm shocked when they cut all the grass, but then when I see it, I think, gosh, this in some ways mimics what the landscape used to look like when it was when there were many animals and people took care of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it was totally
But it wasn't wild.
different stewarding techniques with the different botanical profile throughout, right?
Yes.
I mean, you've got lots of plants here with lots of old ethnobotanical applications. Like I think of the brodias, right? The blue dicks, the declistemas. And so those little tubers down on the bottom there, right? Those the brodia bulbs. That's good food. That's good eating.
That's really good eating.
Mm-hmm.
And the squirrels and raccoons spread it around too. So, they dig them up and then scatter them around so the next year they come up. And one of the things I've noticed is that by actually cutting the grass, cutting all these, this is majority invasive grasses, by cutting them every year, they don't recede the same way. And the native plants begin to proliferate. So you just see on this piece of property here, my land, as opposed to everything around it, there's so many more native species coming back just because I've been cutting the grass and taking care of it so that it doesn't continue to dominate in the way it has for 100 years here.
Yeah, I hear you. That works with some.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't really work with the oats, with some of the fescues, with some other of the grasses here too that like to be cut every year because these annuals have the invasive grasses have short little roots.
Right.
And it takes a long time for our native grasses that are so robust in their ability
and
to
deep-rooted.
That's right, deep-rooted, with the, and those deep roots will stabilize the soil and increase water infiltration, right? And recycle nutrients. All those other invasive grasses, and
they suck the water up before it can get there.
That's right. To the woe of oak tree saplings and whatnot.
But as I was saying, one of the advantages also of cutting it is that the deer and like the cut grass, and so the oat grasses and stuff, as they're cut, they'll eat them right down to the ground.
Yeah.
If they're cut, they really it's easier to eat, I guess, to chew. You don't see deer really grabbing long stalks of oats. They never did. They didn't evolve to do that.
Right.
So you see them where I've cut the grass up front, where the deer are. They just come there. They're all over the place. They're grazing,
right? Because
it's easy fresh pickings.
Yeah, and in pre-contact times, we've got sedges collected for basket making and whatnot, right?
Along the creeks, rivers, and lagoon. Yeah. The sedge are all water. They're all very close to water. They grow in sand.
I see. Okay, very good.
And the old people used to cultivate them because they wanted the very long roots. Right. So they would cut them as they harvested them. They would also then cut them so that they would grow longer and longer.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah.
Well, because of these Eurasian grasses, we have to cut now at the beginning of summer,
right,
and not burn towards the end of August. Really, is when it would have happened.
Yeah,
before in older historical regimes when there were these grasses, and I think we've got about 200 species of noxious weeds, as the FDA calls them, right? So we've got about 2,000 species of invasive plants, but there's like the top 200 that are really about ecological conversion, right? From grasslands to pasture lands, and if we're not careful, towards just the Eurasian steppe, just completely,
Well, it's interesting because it seems to me that with the invasive species, while at first advantageous, big grasses for cattle and things like that, ultimately it begins to devolve so that those same species can't survive here. For instance, up here, as in much of California, we're plagued now by the star thistle, and animals can't graze and eat. Cows, horses, all of those things, they can't eat that. In fact, the star thistles can cause death and stuff with a lot of the animals. So ironically, you create a landscape to feed the animals you bring here that are foreign, and ultimately the foreign food that you brought will turn on you.
That's right.
And turn on the animals.
That's right.
It's not sustainable, I guess, is a simple way of putting it.
It's one of the great threats to California botanical biodiversity.
Yeah, I think it's indicative of the short-sightedness, profit in the moment rather than the long view of sustainability. The indigenous view is one that you imagine, well, the old people knew, but now you imagine a long, sustainable future where these things continue in a way that you can co-evolve. You work with the land so that the land in turn takes care of you. That, is the long view. The indigenous view is the wider view, the longer view. The view of, the Europeans is quick profit, subsequently short-sightedness. They don't see the kinds of things they're going to do. The Europeans are more coyote-like than coyote.
That's right. That's right.
They've totally forgotten any of the indigenous the verities of nature that were part of it. And yes, we have to forget that we don't destroy it. We're still in it. We're just having our effect on it. And the question is, what do we do about our effect? Can we change our effect? Can we change the way we interact with the environment? Can we see it differently and live with it differently? Big questions for the future.
The answer is yes, though. I have faith.
I hope so. I do. I believe we can do it. And you know what? You do it everywhere and every moment you can.
Every moment you can. It's almost like California remembering itself somehow.
By
1880, really, the Central Valley was completely transformed. From its natural, now it's standing about 97% extinct. Those original botanical patterns across the Central Valley, and within like 30 years, really.
Yeah.
The Spanish did a bunch of seeding of these invasive grasses from Europe, but it really wasn't until the gold rush that all the American farmers came, with the intent, I think, to turn California into Europe. Right? That was sort of like what they were working at, right?
Isn't that what the Europeans and basically that Western culture has done everywhere it's gone? It sought to replicate itself everywhere it goes.
Right. Sought to replicate itself everywhere it goes.
Almost inevitable, unconsciously, unwittingly. They don't know anything else. They can't imagine because of the arrogance, because of their sense of entitlement. They feel that that's also what they're supposed to do.
Yeah,
they're supposed to remember with the Spanish, when they came here, they were to get land and riches for the crown.
Yes.
That they were instructed to do so
by
the king, who was in turn appointed by God.
Right.
And the Pope.
Yes.
So they were obeying laws without having a way to talk to others. And look what's happening today, Obi. You have parties of people. One of the disasters that we're having between the left and the right is they're no longer talking to one another. They're only talking to each other and confirming each other's points of view. So what is fact anymore? So, and so you look at the consequences of this kind of thinking, and I believe that every moment and every minute you try your best to remember these things and act accordingly. Change. Imagine something different, and act something different. What do they say? Live in the world that you imagine.
Okay. What do you think Mabel would say to that, though?
Right. Well, she says there's no imagination, and
I'm talking about Mabel McKay here.
Right? Yes, Mabel McKay,
the great
medicine woman and basket weaver. She would say, well, of course, she would always laugh. She'd always laugh because she was here and now. so much, but she'd always laugh at me and say, "Oh, he's doing it according to his own idea." That was one of her great phrases, that people take Indian things or ideas and they do it to their own idea. And of course they do. But listen, you mentioned Mabel, and the birds are all over. Look at swallows all over the place.
Well, I've been reading your book, Weaving the Dream, this Mabel McKay story. Yesterday was the 30th anniversary of her death.
Yes.
I saw.
And my adopted mother. They both went the same day.
Blessed be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, no, my mother the day before the 30th. Mabel was the 31st.
She challenges me. She challenges me with this idea of change being something good. You brought up Coyote before.
Yeah.
Coyote thinks that he can change things for the better.
Yeah.
Right. So the story we talked about teasing today as we slide into that sort of segment of today's episode of Place and Purpose here. Episode 11. Can you believe it?
Here we are. It's gone so fast, as the seasons in life do. And Obi and everybody listening, if nothing else, this is for me anyway, it's and of course, as I jokingly say, now that we're done talking about me, can we please talk about me? But for me, it's a great moment to take inventory of this moment, of the seasons, of this place now,
right?
In my own mind and experience, to sit here and stop for a moment.
Right. Let's relish that for a little bit more before we jump onto too much Coyote wisdom. Here we are in this beautiful revealed dell at this blink of seasonal character between the leaving of the vernal sphere into summer.
Yeah.
Where summer, for the first time in a very long time, in many years, in fact, feels like a reward.
Yeah.
After a long, very generous, wet year, we now have this ability, this capacity to enjoy summer, as opposed to fearing summer, right? Fearing who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of months, but let's
in
balance,
August, let's say.
Right. Let's balance on this moment of hope and replenishment. When you talk about these ancient bay laurels here as being happy, and you could kind of feel it. It's energetic, isn't it?
Look at those oaks. Look at how green. Look at. I've never seen them so full of leaf. Those old oaks. They're just amazing. Mm-hmm. Things are just happy. The other thing I want to mention is that it's been such a long, cold spring. This is really the first day, yesterday at the end of the day, but this is the first day. There's only been a few days where we've had spring/summer type weather. This is going to be one of them. And it's so, as you mentioned, exciting.
Yeah. Well, you're in short sleeves. I'm always wearing sweater upon sweater sitting here in the dell.
You're probably protecting yourself against ticks. Unless they get inside the clothes, that's another problem.
Ticks don't scare me too much.
Yeah. That's another advantage of cutting the grass. You can walk through here without worrying about them jumping on you. Mm-hmm. They might fall out of the trees.
Right. Well, we already had a buck sighting this morning, just about 10 minutes ago. With the velvet antlers are already coming out. Yeah. The quail are everywhere coming up the hill. This morning.
They're nesting. They're all pairing up and nesting. They're all walking around here checking out everything. Mm-hmm. I get nests all around. All my plants all around here, they're all around, and it's so wonderful. Later in June, in the third week or so, I might look out the window, and the mother doesn't know I'm watching, but she comes out, and there'll be 10, 15 of these little baby balls.
There's not much in the world cuter than a baby quail.
Oh, you're right.
So I've spent the past couple of weeks up at Whiskeytown National Recreation Area as the artist in residence for the National Park Service. Mm-hmm. So I've spent. I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing there, Greg. I mean, I was painting wildflowers. I was getting to know the land. I was meeting with botanists. I was meeting with geologists. I was meeting with Park Service members. They know my work, and I am learning about theirs. So Whiskeytown National Recreation Area is this it's an old place. It's, up in Wintoonland. And there is this salt seep that is at the center of these three faults that come together. At the middle of where these three creeks come together to is a very sacred spot, you know. And it has been clearly for thousands of years, right? This is where the elk come down to get their salt, and it's a hunting ground. Of course, for the past 170 years or so, it's become like the farmer built his ranch house there. The Tower Historic District there at Whiskeytown, and there is an endemic little grass that only grows in a half acre. Right in the salt, it's a little alkali ryegrass. It's beautiful, so there's these incredible habitat
because the
moments.
Cows and other things didn't get there. So
that's right.
They can't eat the salt.
I guess I bring this up because one of the questions we have from one of our listeners, Mike Hubbard, who's he's sort of become Mr. Sutter Buttes. I've run into him a few times and talk about an interesting place that is a sacred place that retains some sort of natural character too. He says he has two questions that are not unrelated to the story that I just told about Whiskeytown. He says, you have spoken about the aged native trees around you, but I don't recall any words about the grasses in the meadow where you sit. I guess that's what we're talking about this morning. Most of California has been overrun by introduced ephemeral Mediterranean grasses that took over the deeply rooted perennial native bunch grasses. Yes, good point. Was your meadow remote enough to retain its indigenous grasses?
This meadow here?
Yes.
No, it has not.
Yeah.
And the mountain hasn't. I mean, I've lived here, Mike, 18 years, and of course the land and the landscape here was greatly compromised. There were first cattle that went through here up in these mountains. Well, sheep. They raised a lot of sheep up here after they killed all the mountain lions and coyotes for a while. But then when those started coming back and they started getting the sheep, they put cattle back up here. So we've had, 150 years of cattle and sheep up here, and subsequently the foreign dung where they carry the oats. So the mountain has been greatly compromised. What remains, there are patches of purple needle grass, none of which is on my land here. And I'd like to experiment in planting it. Some of it's worked well. What I do have is some of the old indigenous clovers that come up in the earlier spring.
Yes.
And, we ate clover. So and there are many varieties of clover, indigenous clover. And some of those have survived here, Mike, but otherwise, no, the land's greatly compromised. You make me think of a story. Muir wrote about Hetch Hetchy, the beautiful tall oat grass, and the early Americans who came here wrote about the tall grass, these meadows of grass that are as high as a person's shoulders, and how beautiful the natural landscape was. Well, it was already compromised. Those oats had already been from the Mexican cattle, the Spanish and Mexican cattle that came
for decades
already. So by the time Muir got there, he didn't even know what was indigenous. He just assumed that what he was seeing, because there weren't a lot of people around, the Indian people were gone, compromised by the time he got there, or on small indentured servants in various places. He had no idea. And so to imagine, Mike, an indigenous landscape is a stretch, because it was so different. Imagine bunch grasses versus the cover that we see now. And it looked different. There weren't the golden hills of California.
Right.
That's the last 200 years.
Right.
And it happened so quickly. Those grasses, as you mentioned earlier, Obi, being shallow rooted and spreading, they sucked up the water within 50 years in this area, and the native grasses were gone. I mean, so quickly. Which is one of the reasons the cattle industry survived here. The ranchos here ran tens of thousands of cattle wild over these hills. And every fall they would have what they would call a kill or a matara. They would bring them all in and kill thousands and then sell the hides to Mexico and trade the hides off the tallow. So it wasn't even about the meat. They just throw the meat and the animals away. And they were raising these thousands and thousands of cattle for hides and the tallow for soap. Yeah, they would have the slaughters every fall.
That's interesting. That segues. I mean, that story that is so wounding in so many ways segues into second part of Mike's question somehow. Sacred places or landscapes are revered by indigenous people around the world, yet that is a concept that is foreign to most of us of European descent. We grew up with the understanding that only places like the Taj Mahal, Notre Dame, and Vatican were holy. Can you help us understand and relate to this indigenous concept? Well, so I think of Sonoma Mountain, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that I would argue that the concept of a sacred place is also a European concept because all of the landscape was sacred. What has become sacred in indigenous memory now are places where certain activities took place, unusual formations of the landscape that evoke a certain story, a place where we did certain ceremonies for certain things. Those things that we remember become sacred versus, and that might be, Mike, a way to distinguish between a sacred place like the Vatican or the Taj Mahal, where the hierarchical beings or gods somehow reside in as representative or as an anchor of nation states. We didn't have that. Remember, the big religions all evolved in nation state contexts. So and became to serve those nation states. The behavior of the nation states certainly doesn't replicate what was written about the life of Jesus, for instance.
Right.
So, as Mabel used to say, Jesus was a good medicine man. I see him in my dreams. And she said, a student asked her about, well, then do you believe in the New Testament? And she says, no, that's just what the anthropologists did.
Okay. Well, I again, wrestling with Mabel, the idea of memory written on the land, as opposed to a dynamic that Mike describes in his question, and I think that you're fleshing out here mythologically, that is almost a narcissistic mythology. I mean, the worshiping a building or considering a building as a sacred space is almost augmenting the human and not necessarily the networked community outside that what supports the human.
I like exactly what I think you're saying, Obi, and that is, again, when you start thinking about what's a sacred place, that assumes that something opposite it or adjacent it isn't sacred. So one of the things about all of our ceremonies and so forth, each ceremony, all songs were reminders of the interconnectedness of something. So at a sacred place, that sacredness had to do with an intersection of all things, all life.
Okay.
And they were to remind you of that. Rather than a transcendent God or a certain place where you would go and get certain, each place had a power or certain things. There's the sacred places that Essie Parish, there's a mountain, and there's a sacred mountain where in her dreams she went into that mountain. The mountain exists, and there's holes or places that speak in the land that people can point to, but she traveled to the same place in her dreams. We consider those places sacred because we remember something about her, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't other sacred places where she and others didn't pray or go.
I see. Essie Parish, the
Kashaya dreamer and prophet.
Okay.
And remember, Mabel in her own life, the sacred waters where she was put under the water, that was a place that we remember now that's sacred, where the doctors would go under the water for days at a time. And, Same at Bodega Bay. My great-great-grandfather, Tom Smith, went under, they say under Bodega Bay, there's a place where all the medicine men's equipment, rattles and things are there that they go down and get and then come back with. Of course, so
sacred objects,
secret objects, secret things. Yes.
Tole Lake over here too.
Yeah, Tole Lake is the same. Well, Tole Lake was a little different. Well, it was a sacred place, but it was kind of a dumping ground for rocks and amulets and things that took diseases out of patients' bodies. And one of the things that the doctors did is certain kinds of diseases that they doctored and pulled out with these things, they would throw in the water to drown them and leave them there.
Right.
Yeah. So, but again, the idea of sacred is, I mean, where do you cut it off? There are places you go to pray, you feel the essence of things, but that's only to remind you of how all of life is sacred and your responsibility in all of life.
So, now there's this, we were talking about places, which is space, but there's also this element of time, right? And the only time you ever use the word sacred in your book here, how a mountain was made, the only time you ever use the word sacred is in terms of time, sacred time.
Yeah.
When the animals were people, which is a very interesting dynamic and again, this segues into today's story. A little bit, when the animals were people, which removes these stories from the field of metaphor.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very important point to bring up. And this also sort of echoes Mabel's sentiment that imagination doesn't exist, right? These stories are about a time before the fixing of things. Yeah. Right? Yeah. When things became fixed, which is that double entendre word that I love using so much. And I think it gets to the very the strength and the weakness at the same time of the English language. Yeah. The time which is almost like it's almost like how the Judeo-Christian uses the word fall. Right, the before the fall, Eden, right? Kind of. But it also makes reference to eternity outside of time. Eternity has nothing to do with time. It's just it's outside of it. So in that way, there is a timelessness of these stories. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to talk with you today, Greg, was about your story. Coyote builds a costume fit for a chief. I think this is an interesting story to tell right now.
You always pick out good ones, Obi.
Oh, yeah? Well, I have a real love for almost the Shakespearean quality of these characters that you describe, who keep coming up again and again. Yeah. There's almost like a quasi-pantheon, if you will, of the tribe, the big village at the headwaters of Copeland Creek, which is just about a mile from here, right? Something like that. And where Chief Coyote is with his wife, Frog Woman, which I love as an ecologist. You have the predator with the amphibian, the indicator species with some kind of keystone species, that seem to be
married,
right? Very much people. They're people, and they're acknowledging all of these other entities in the tribe. There are people. There's rattlesnake, and there's quail, and there's water bug, and there's all these different people. But in this story, we get a glimpse into other ecological entities. Yeah. Based, and Coyote needs to confront his own dissatisfaction. And in so doing, and he fails spectacularly at it, doesn't he? I mean, almost to his death. Yeah. Okay, so let's begin.
His vanity almost smothers him.
His vanity almost smothers vanity.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting idea.
Remember, the vanity is predicated on the preoccupation of the self.
The preoccupation of the self. Okay. Yeah. This is where we start to get into these paradigms that almost act as I don't want to use a word as dismissive as like cautionary tales, right?
Yeah.
Because we all see that's almost a cliche to call this. It's deeply psychological,
Yeah.
and it gets into like the permaculture
Yeah.
of the community,
Yeah.
writ large across the landscape. So we've got Coyote. The story begins where the chief is walking around. Chief Coyote is walking around. And he's upset that things are going well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
there's no problems. He's doing his job. He's been doing a great job. The people are fed. The people are safe. He's got a good wife. They're going to honor him in a couple days even.
Yeah.
His wife has had a dream of an honoring ceremony, but still he's not happy.
Because of his vanity.
He thinks he should have
his
more
hubris.
attention and get more gratitude for what he's done. Yeah.
Right. Which, I mean, that reminds me of something that Malcolm Margolin says in The Ohlone Way, which I think is a similar dynamic where it's like, it's the chief's job to not make new things happen, but instead to make sure that the traditional ways are upheld.
Well, and I presume there were some similarities, but here among the Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo, the chief was basically the handmaiden to the dreamers and so forth. He was the one that organized folks and did things, and he was here in the Coast Miwoks. You could nominate your son, your uncle, your father, or whoever to become chief.
Yes.
But it was a group of 4 to 7 older women who ultimately made the decision who would get to be chief. And then they would train him for 7 years in the art of leadership and elocution and all those things, so that he would know how to talk to the people, he would know how to negotiate. But it was the dreamers who would say, the salmon are coming. I had a dream the salmon were coming. And the chief, or so-called chief or headman, would say, okay, everybody, let's get our nets ready. But so there was this dynamic of power where he was the one that kept things organized, organized people and things like that and so forth. There are birds.
Yeah. The vultures are,
Yes.
are casting shadows.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about...
But in this case,
Okay.
I mean, Coyote is, he wants more attention. He wants gratitude. I've been doing a good job. I need more praise. I mean, you need to love me more. You need to appreciate me for what I'm doing. Things are going smoothly.
Right. And so he says... So he wants to make himself more than what he is. He wants to make himself something other than who he is.
Yeah.
Right. So again, we have a story of self actualization.
Yeah.
Okay. And he tells his nephew Chicken Hawk, who is an incredibly good guy.
Yeah.
Very loyal soldier for
loyal to his uncle. Yeah.
Loyal to his uncle.
Yeah.
To go get the secret things.
Yeah.
The secret things. So here we have power, and the power is in... You got Douglas squirrels here? Sorry.
Yes.
Douglas squirrels, big gray squirrels.
Big.
Okay.
And they're all making their nests up here all over the place.
All right, very good.
Taking things out of my garden and carrying them up the trees.
Sorry for jumping all over the place. They're just looking. They're not the city eastern red squirrels.
No. These are the big fat ones.
These are our natives.
Yeah. They're the native squirrels. And
for sure. Now, okay, so let me get back to the story. And again, the book is How a Mountain Was Made. The story is Coyote builds a costume fit for a chief. And if you don't have Greg Sarris's book, How a Mountain Was Made, go get it. This is what the first the first edition hardback looks.
This is what the
when you go
later the paperback looks.
Right. When you go into when you go to support your local independent bookstore, right? And you buy that's good. Or you can buy it at Heyday Books, our common publisher,
Heyday,
right? just always reminding that it really feels like how these last few episodes have really stacked up of place and purpose that we are discussing these stories and how they relate to our style of being in the world.
Yeah.
And being in the right now.
Yeah.
Right. So here we have, let's just make our way through the narrative of the story here, because it really gets good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that happens is that Chicken Hawk goes to the sun, then he goes to the old bay laurel trees.
But remember, first off, Chicken Hawk reminds him this isn't a good idea. He wants to tell him something and warn him about something, but Coyote doesn't want to even hear it. He's so driven by his purpose.
Okay. Yeah.
But then at the end, Chicken Hawk says, well, that's what I was trying to tell you. But I'm jumping ahead.
The power of community. I find that so much in my own life, in my own work.
Yeah.
That if it's not for like the great people at Heyday Books, for example, my books would be a chaotic mess of me trying to find something.
Oh, we have to love Heyday. Yeah.
We have to love Heyday.
Yeah.
Good. Love our editors. Love our community.
Yes. Shout out to Emmerich. Emmerich does both of us, right?
Yeah, Emmerich Anklem is my editor as well.
He's very careful, very good.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So, Emmerich, our own private Chicken Hawk.
Our own private Chicken Hawk. I listen to him though. He'll tell you I listen to him.
Right.
I'll ask him about you, Obi. I don't know.
I certainly do. I certainly do. Always listen to your editors.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the song, the chief song. Okay, so we've got the objects, the secret objects, where the power is, that is only invoked through the song. Okay, so there's this song here that Chicken Hawk sings, the first verse of which he sings to the sun. The sun asks him to sing it. Soundless like the wind, I pass by you, lifting, I'm here dancing for you.
Yeah.
Who is the you and who is the I there, right?
Yeah.
I am the chief dancing for you, the people.
Yes.
I think is it.
Yes, yeah.
So there's a promise inside the song that Coyote's not listening to.
No, and all of these things continue to be reminders of what he does. Right. And the greatness of what he is, just as and everything keeps reminding him of the ways in which he's connected to all these things in the community and what he's doing.
Right.
And he just doesn't, when you're focused on getting what you want, when you're so focused, when your purpose is so strong, you are basically walking with blinders on. You're so narrow-sighted, you only see in terms of what you want and getting what you want. Mm-hmm. And so he's oblivious even to who he is and what powers he has.
That's right. Well, he wants to invent them out of his own hubris, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
He takes this thing, and these things are like a coat and a hat and a rattle and these kind of things.
They'll make him more flashy and beautiful.
Paint, right?
Paint,
right. And make him more flashy and beautiful.
Yeah. They'll notice him.
Because he misidentifies the power.
Exactly. It isn't in the things that you can see. It's what he's been doing.
Okay, let me dig beneath that a little bit more, because I think there's something else going on there. And it has to do with the nature of discovery. It has to do with the nature of genius.
Yeah.
And I think Mabel McKay would have a problem with both of those ideas, right?
Yeah.
That nothing is really discovered. It's just forgotten and then remembered again.
Yeah.
As if all discovery is just bad memory.
Right.
Like I want to of course credit things like scientific innovation, especially in the physical sciences. You've got biology, you've got astrophysics that are maybe just revealing just an endless telescoping funnel of the great mystery. Right. As if we still know very little about the absolute nature of the universe. Right. We're just telling ourselves a different story every decade.
Well, right. And all we'll ever have is a story. The only medicine, the only power, we can't fly, we don't have big claws. Okay. The only things humans can do is tell stories. That's our only power. Our stories can kill 6 million Jews. Our stories could create peace.
Right.
So that's all we have. Our stories, it's stories that create wars. It's stories that has people debating about the debt ceiling.
Right.
These are stories. These are, I mean, they're connected to tangible reality in many instances, but the only way we talk about that reality and shape it is with the stories we tell one another.
That's beautifully put.
Yeah.
That's beautifully
That's
put.
all we have. So science
Stories all the way down.
Stories all the way down. No matter what story science tells about the ultimate nature of the universe, it may affect how we interact with one another, but it is in fact the same thing. The story affecting how we interact with one another.
Right.
As what stories have always done.
Right. How we interact with one another and how that erodes, doesn't it? Especially in these modernist paradigms, right?
Yeah.
Discovery itself seems to be a modernist paradigm. And I'm no sort of like primitivist. I'm not like saying we should go back and listen to these stories as some sort of true things.
I wouldn't suggest that either.
Right.
I think we should put these stories in dialogue with all we know now, and all the other stories we have. I love the way you, of course, my hubris, the way you connect these stories to the classic stories, whether it be Shakespeare, Homer, or any of these classic stories in the West that again remind us of how fragile and silly human nature and human and hubris can be.
When you forget, right? Yeah. So with all these objects that Chicken Hawk collects for his uncle Coyote, Coyote, there's rules attached to all these objects, okay? Yes. Like, for example, the robe that is collected by Chicken Hawk underneath the big bay laurel tree, who says, there are stains on the seams. Do not try to get the stains out. Like, this is one of the rules, okay? There's all the objects have rules.
Right.
And what's the first thing that Coyote does is he tries to get the stains out. Right? Because he thinks that he can improve it.
Yes.
By his own genius, by his own machination, he can make it better.
He thinks he has enough power that he doesn't have to be accountable.
Doesn't have to be accountable to...
Or suffer the consequences.
Yeah, to the tradition, to the responsibility, to the story that has been already told.
To the other parts of life.
Right. Isn't that something that's playing out right now, though, in modernist society? Yeah. I mean, I wrestle with it as an artist who thinks he's inventing something, you know, as if that were, it's just me not remembering, me wanting to cry out to my community, which I suppose I'm doing here today, right now, we're not telling ourselves a very good story. In fact, all of this technology, you know, we talk about the discovery of the internal combustion engine, leading eventually to the Apollo missions, leading eventually to these computers we have in our pockets.
To AI, artificial intelligence.
Right. All of these tools of isolation.
Yeah. That only further isolate us.
Simplification. As opposed to towards resiliency, right? Yeah. Like, so as Coyote isolates himself, breaks all the rules, thinks that he's doing something genius
for himself,
freaks out the community.
Yeah.
So the ceremony happens. Yeah. They don't even recognize him. They think that he's a demon.
They think it's a monster.
They think it's a monster.
Yeah.
And then like he gets entangled in the coat and the rattle and he starts
his inventions.
Yeah. And it just, you know, he's about to die.
Yeah.
And
he's smothered by them. Yeah.
Right. And he like violently shakes off the robes and realizes, what have I done?
Yeah.
You know. So there is this redemptive moment
where he finally sees at the end. Then that's when Chicken Hawk says, that's what I was trying to tell you. You are good enough as you are, and people did appreciate you, but you wouldn't even let me tell you, and you had to learn the hard way. You know, that when reading the story, again, now that we're done talking about me, we must talk about me, Obi. But in going over the story, right after we spoke Wednesday, I believe it was, a couple days ago, about which story we were going to do, I read this, and I thought I was kind of ashamed of myself, because I find that as a leader of my own people, I vacillate between two extremes that are ridiculous. The one that I'm not doing enough, that I'm insignificant in what I'm doing, and there's bigger problems in the world, and how can I fix more things? To the other side is, my people don't appreciate all I'm doing. All I do is work. I've sacrificed my whole life. I've done all this for them. Do they know, all the work that I do for them, and the negotiating with the politicians and all of that? And so I kind of felt like Coyote in this story, and it corrected me and gave me some perspective. I forgot, I as I go through these, vacillate between these kinds of things, I too forgot the story. And just reading it reminded me of what is really important for me, not whether I'm, need more recognition. The recognition is when a woman at the casino with the great benefits that we've offered says to me, I was able to take my child to the emergency room at 2 a.m. last night without worrying about whether or not I had enough money.
Yes.
When I see my cousin in UC in a master's program, a single mother with 3 children doing this, then I think, ultimately, you will probably be forgotten or whatever, but what you are doing and the sacrifices you have made have spread peace and goodness in the world. And that's the thing that's important, not you. Not my rewards. Because I'm thinking about my rewards instead of the purpose of why I'm doing what I'm doing is to, do good as much as I can. So.
That's beautiful. Yeah. That's your inner negotiation.
My inner negotiation. Yeah, and I go back and forth, and, I'll tell Angela, my assistant, I'm so tired of this. Now what do they want? And, they're calling and they want more or whatever. And, I keep going, do they know how I stay up at night and worry about these things, and how I have to write these things and do all of this? And, what do I want? And then, of course, I get thank you notes, and I think, but
right.
But I vacillate between that. And then, of course, I see the situation in the world, and I'm going, well, what am I doing? Or is it enough? Or could I do more? Or how can I do more? But the blessings come. I mean, we're getting more land, the tribe is, so we'll have more land to grow food for folks.
Is this from the new compact that you just successfully negotiated? Tell us about that.
Well, we have 73 more acres into trust, and we're looking at purchasing another, I believe it's 40 acres. And the 40 acres that we're looking to purchase has already been certified organic farmland, which will enable us to grow organic. My dream, one of my big dreams, is to grow enough organic food to sell at cost or deliver free to low-income neighborhoods and the elderly, so that people in low-income neighborhoods and so forth can have the kind of produce wealthier people get in Whole Foods.
Yes, so, of course.
And we have the resources to do that, the Great Spirit willing. So there's all these kinds of things that I keep wanting to do, but
I can't wait to talk with you about all of them. I mean, here we are in episode 11, and we've just begun to scratch the surface of this bigger dialogue, this bigger conversation. Yeah. So I'm happy to announce today, I don't know if we've really announced it yet, but we are going into season 2. So we've done this year-long experiment, and then we're going to do it again.
And thank you all for listening to us, blah, blah, blah. I think early on I said, at least speaking for myself, I guess I'm vain enough to think that people want to listen to me talking. Right. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate the questions, the interactions, and what we really want to do in season 2 is extend the the dialogue to guests. We'll be having a lot of guests that are coming, and
multiple locations
and different locations in our territory here, and the guests are all people that are concerned about the same things all of us are. Obi and I, and all of you who are listening, questions about the landscape, conservation, if that kind of word appeals to many people, culture, purpose and place.
That's right. The indigenous mind versus the colonizing mind, which is the negotiation that happens inside of my heart and mind every day as I encounter this information and attempt to develop a posture towards it to then tell the story. It's interesting. I think that most men and women sort of come into their own leadership styles, which is sort of the theme of today's talk, right? Leadership styles is related to Coyote and what he's got going on in terms of fatherhood or motherhood, right? Which is something that we're not. That's not in our karma, so to say, right? Yeah. And it's not in Coyote's. Coyote doesn't have any kids, does he?
He did have 2 sons, remember,
that's
but
right.
he got rid of it. He threw them up, and they became the sun and the moon. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So check out episode 10 for that discussion of how. But I want to talk to you about those 73 acres real fast in regards to a question from Hannah. Okay, so we got a question from Hannah here, and it says, I currently work with the Siskiyou Land Trust, which is looking towards stepping into the tribal land reciprocity movement with local tribes. There are some great initiatives intact at the moment through Siskiyou Land Trust. Would like to embody this work as a core value. You touched a bit on this through your last episode, and I'm curious of your perspective as to the approach that this land trust can take. I come from work with the Bishop Paiute tribe, and it's all just a bit different. Thank you for the gifts, your stories, and conversations. I'm so inspired by your work. Well, thank you, Hannah. Yeah. So the land back movement, the 73 acres that your tribe is about to receive.
Well, we bought the land. We purchased it. But first of all, Hannah, reciprocity is a word that I love.
Me too.
So
Me too.
That's a great word, and the action that it suggests. Hannah, I think one of the things we need to do, one of the things that the tribe decided when we were going to do a casino resort, and I know so much of it sounded antithetical, but we wanted to use our resources to benefit Indian and non-Indian alike. So it wasn't just about us. We want to obviously take care of ourselves and become self-sustaining. But at the same time, we want to extend and work with the community in a way that is transformative of the way we all do things, ways in which we can work together. Reciprocity. How can we work with others, Indian and non-Indian, to create a better understanding of the world? The dialogue that Obi and I are having is basically one of reciprocity between, as you might want to say, the colonizing mind and the indigenous mind, whatever those things might be, and how gray the boundaries are. Right. But at the same time, when it comes to land, the land back is really important. But let me caution that that you can't always assume that Native people alone have all the resources to take care of that land, because our own people have been compromised. We don't have the financial resources. Sometimes we don't even have the full knowledge. So we have to work with scientists, with ecologists and others together, because the land itself now is a mixture of cultures. The land is intercultural. The land that we can work together will be intercultural. So I think the caution is to make sure that there's a partnership, and it should be a 50-50 where we can listen to each other and respect one another in our attempts, first of all, to acquire the land or to give the land back to the indigenous people, but at the same time, for the non-indigenous people to listen to how the land should be cared for, and also to understand that the indigenous people will need outside resources to do much of that, especially if it's large tracts of land, because there's only so many of us left to do it.
Right.
So we need each other. That model, I think, is seen here in our regional park, Tole Lake, the 4,000 acres there. And also as we're starting now with our co-management agreement with Point Reyes National Seashore, 27,000 acres. Obviously, there's not enough of us indigenous people here to take care of 27,000 acres. And it's going to take all of us working together to restore and do that. I think land back is good, but at the same time, don't turn your nose up at co-management situations with national parks and so forth, because at the end of the day, I think we need one another's resources and knowledge to make these things work.
Right. Well, in the past 10 minutes, you brought up a few things that I hope we can dedicate entire episodes to next season, including food sovereignty.
Yeah.
And land back as it is. It is this concept of property, right? Property itself, private property, public property, held in trust, as we say. Are these not models going forward that should be addressed? I think is the point that you might be making there.
Yeah, I mean, we have to talk about these things. Again, you don't want to, indigenous people, or at least I don't want to replicate a thing of private property. You can't come here and all of that. Trust land, remember that Indians, for those federally recognized tribes who have trust land, it's a government 99-year lease. We don't own anything. It's where their leases agreements with the federal government. But that said, I think that it is really important. Food sovereignty, all those things are really important, but we have to share. We have to see models of how we can use one another going forward.
Oh, Greg, that is so great. Thank you for sharing with us. We have viewers watching now live from Washington, Connecticut, Oregon, Idaho, and throughout California. How about that, huh?
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I'm honored. I'm humbled.
Isn't it? I am too.
Yeah. I hope you like this, my homeland here.
It's not too shabby. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
We have a question from Christopher here. I've enjoyed your discussions of the natural world. Is there a way to help our spiritual world heal as we learn to appreciate all that is around us? The spiritual world, I believe, is part of the narrative complex that we are building together, that we see in these Coyote stories, but more so in the science. Like, if I were to, I write these big books on California nature, and as I go forward and to where my work, what sort of emergent qualities, what philosophies are forming the backbone of my vision are these, what I think of as vectors of resiliency, as they're tied to biodiversity. The more intact character of California that we have here, the stronger it will be to face disruptive stress factors in the future. So tying biodiversity to the health of California's human and more than human societies, kin, this reciprocation of one to the other, these ecological services that are informed by biodiversity, is, I think, where my work is going. And to me, that is spiritual, or at least
maybe I would
relationships
simplify it,
please,
by simply saying that the spiritual and the physical are inseparable.
Okay.
So as the physical, if you're physically stressed, we humans are stressed today, as is the landscape. So one of the things, and I don't know that you wanted any methods, but one of the things I try to do, because I tend to think, oh my gosh, the trees are sick, there's sudden oak, there's this, there's that, and what am I going to do and all of that? And I come out here sometimes and I just sit and listen to the crickets and to the birds. And because I what good am I if my mindset is that I have to fix things or things have to get changed or all of that? Why can't I sit and let the life that is good here? The birds are still singing. The crickets are singing. The grass is growing, even if it's still sacred. Even just because it's in European grass. I mean, let's just stop a second. Europe, if you want to go there, then Europeans are an invasive species, right? And I'm part invasive species in my blood. So I think it's important just to sit and let you become healthy or find the health that is in nature, the spirit in nature, so that I am healthier going forward, working with the environment, becoming healthier. It has to. I have, because I've known so many environmentalists that are so angry and upset and intense, and that's antithetical to what they're trying to do and who they're working with, which is the trees and the land.
Right. It bespeaks a, character. I'm full of anger, passion, and appetite as well. I suppose it's a disposition. I guess what you're describing is a practice, right? The practice of going forward. I mean, that's I paint all day long.
Think about if you've been in love, Obi.
Okay.
What love is like, that experience of ecstasy. Let ecstasy in nature inform you. That's where the spirits come. They undo the ego. They undo this, all of this sort of stuff. The stuff that I get preoccupied with, this isn't preoccupied with any of that.
Yes. Yeah, I hear your words. I feel your sentiment. I understand too the tragedy, the immensity of the panic that my love is being violated, extracted from, exploited. The object of my love, if it's, getting back to our first question, California as a sacred place in general, this it is my perception that it's complete, that it's wholesale, that the wholesale deformation of these of this character, of these natural regimes, of these more than human regimes have been so violated as to be unrecognizable to some idea of home that I have made up, So I understand that this is my shortcoming, but I also am unsure as to the antidote to that poison.
Let us not forget, as I think I was alluding to a moment ago, it's still all life.
It's still all life.
And we are all having an impact on it as it's having an impact on us. Nothing has ever changed. Things have become radically different. They've become unhealthy. But at the same time, it's life. I mean, those things happen. Ultimately, too, Obi, that anger, if you will, that passion is what will spur you to action.
Yeah.
But as you're spurred to action, you can't forget that it's still life, and what you're doing will influence this life. And just do it.
That's right. That's right. There's a ledger here, right?
Yeah.
In my own heart, I consider it success if I get up and face this work from love and not from something akin to hate, right? Where
exactly, and anger, because that's the whole
even
thing.
If I'm just 51 to 49 or something,
and then come here to get the 51, right? Go out in nature where you go, because think how good you feel when you're out, like up in Whiskey Town. You're so healthy, and then you come here and there's all this stuff to do, but the fact that we're able to do it is another thing. So, I keep going. As Mabel always used to say, and it's on the tip of my tongue, if you mean business, do business.
If you mean business.
And if you do business, mean business.
Oh, I'm so glad you pulled one last Mabel quote out today.
And that's what we, that's what we do.
That's really good. That's really good. We've got many more questions. I think we're going to table them. I think we're going to bring them up next time.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, because I love to talk to people.
I love to talk to people too. And we're so grateful for the participation, right? So if you go to placeandpurpose.live, which is our website, www.placeandpurpose.live, and you then you then put in your email address, you can win free signed copies of our book, and we'll sign them to you.
Yeah.
And our production team will mail them to you. The June winner is Rick Carina. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, Cirina, from Madison, Wisconsin.
Wow, Madison.
All right.
My adopted mother and her family was from there. So,
All right.
Yeah.
I've never been myself, but Rick, I hope things are going well in Madison, and thank you so much for tuning in.
It's a nice place, Obi. I've gone there to read my books in the past.
Oh, really?
Yes.
All right. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, as always, we have so much to talk about. And
we always just get started. You know what I would love of all of the people, somehow I could see them and they were all could talk to us through the trees, or from all over the world. We could talk. We need a big conversation in this space.
We need a big conversation. Let's make it happen.
We're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Somehow.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
I'm humbled.
All right. We'll see you next month for the last episode in season 1, which is our July episode.
Are we going to give then a preview who some of our first guests are going to be at that time?
Yeah, I think that we can do that.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll talk about that off air. But anyway, have a great summer solstice, everybody.
Yes.
And we'll see you on the other side.